Hello and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to compare Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 with a real-world flight that was recorded on a GoPro Hero5 camera. Apologize for the quality. The Hero5 isn't the greatest, but it's what I had at the time. This flight was flown several years ago. And here we are with Orbx Scenery for this airport, which is Darrington Municipal in Darrington, Washington. And there's our Piper Archer on the ground, getting ready to taxi and take off. We're going to be taking off the same runway 28, and we're going to fly the pattern and come to a landing and then taxi back to the location that you see the airplane right now. So here we are in Flight Simulator 2020, getting ready to taxi out. I'm going to flip-flop between views, between real world, in the cockpit, outside the airplane, and the same thing with Flight Simulator 2020. Here we are leaving the tarmac, and there's the FBO, and coming out onto the taxiway. Here's real world underwing camera. Not the greatest view. I wish it was a little bit wider of a view, but again, it's how I had the camera set up. Now I use a GoPro Hero11, which is much better quality, less shake. It's a very stable image, and I shoot much wider angle. So here we are taxiing out to runway 28, and there we are back to Flight Simulator 2020, getting ready to take the taxiway. I set the weather conditions very similarly between the two. And there we are taxiing in the cockpit view, and now we are back to real world. This real world flight was flown in the fall, so you're going to see some color in the trees. I was extremely impressed with Flight Simulator 2020, becoming a real believer in it, and I shook out some of the bugs that I had due to unfamiliarity with Flight Simulator 2020. But I uploaded the Orbx Scenery for Darrington, and I'm very, very impressed. Look at those clouds. In many ways, and this may sound funny, but it almost felt as though when I did this video that the Flight Simulator 2020 looked more realistic than the actual real-world footage, which is kind of crazy. Here we are coming up to the end of the taxiway to runway 28. We're going to take off to the west and then fly the pattern back to a landing on runway 28. I tried to approximate the location of the airplane in 2020 and in the real-world footage so that they're very closely matched in terms of where the airplane is at any given time. Getting ready here to take off. And now we're taxiing in Flight Simulator 2020. Same location. And back outside the airplane. And I finally figured out how to do replay on Flight Simulator 2020. And it's actually much more useful now for the purpose of making these types of videos. Now we're getting ready to take off in the real world airplane on runway 28, applying full power, checking engine instruments in the green, and power is available for takeoff. We're on the roll. Airspeed indicators live. The clouds were beautiful, both in real world and in Flight Simulator 2020. Again, outside the airplane, nothing beats Flight Simulator 2020. I'm very hopeful that when 2024 comes out, they've improved the airplane systems, user-friendliness, interaction with the instrument panel. Those are things that X-Plane has, right now at least, over Flight Simulator 2020. Here we are getting ready to lift off, and there we are in the air and heading to the west, and then we're going to turn and fly the pattern. Look at those gorgeous clouds in Flight Simulator 2020. Very, very amazing. I was so impressed. There we are on the roll, getting ready to lift off in Flight Simulator 2020. In many ways, sometimes you have to really do a double take to determine whether this is the actual real world or the simulator. That's how good it is. And this is a Coronado Archer airplane, and I was very, very impressed with the detail in it. There we are, real world, outside the airplane. And then we're going to flip back over to Flight Simulator 2020, and we're going to cover that same terrain before we make our left turn and enter into the pattern. Look at those beautiful mountains. Darrington's nestled in a valley in north central Washington, and here we are back to Flight Simulator 2020 and back to real world in the cockpit. Again, trying to simulate the same view, same location of the airplane in both takes a lot of work, believe me. It probably took 5 hours to put this together. Pretty happy with the result, not perfect. I think the greatest limitation was the quality of the footage on the GoPro camera. And here we are flying over the same terrain, getting ready to make our left turnout in the pattern. Those clouds are absolutely fabulous. There's a little bit of snow up on the mountain peaks, very typical all year. There's glaciers up there, back to real world. There you can see my iPad mounted on the control wheel with ForeFlight displayed. I do use ForeFlight in Flight Simulator 2020 as well, and I find it very, very useful. So one of the things in 2020 that's a limitation, in my opinion, is when you interact with the instrument panel, when you interact with your radios, with your GPS, there's no way to do a pop-out panel, like a 2D pop-out panel that you're able to do in X-Plane 11. I'm very, very hopeful that when 2024 comes out, they make that a little bit more user-friendly in terms of your interface with all of the avionics in the airplane. Here we are after our left turn, heading toward those beautiful mountains. And there we are back outside the airplane in 2020. Look at that terrain and those clouds. It, in some ways, looks more realistic than the real-world footage that I took. And there we are making our downwind turn, getting ready to roll out, and we're going to go back to real-world footage. There we are back outside the airplane in 2020. And there you see the airport off to the left in the distance there. On the downwind leg, same view here in the real-world footage. Look at those beautiful fall colors. The sun filtering through the clouds, the shadows of the clouds on the terrain. Again, beautiful clouds here in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. And we're coming up parallel to the runway here. Back inside the cockpit in 2020. Looking for our mark where we can begin our descent and add flaps for our landing. Same location here again in real-world footage. And then back outside the airplane. Pretty decent camera, the GoPro Hero5, but when I went to the 11, it was a night and day difference, and I wish I'd make that transition sooner. Back to 2020 outside the airplane. Getting pretty close to the runway threshold, getting ready to make our descent. And then back to real world, same location. The beautiful little town of Darrington, a gorgeous little mountain town. Didn't have time to explore it when I landed there. Pretty much landed, took off, and head back home to Tacoma Narrows. Here we are getting ready for our descent point. Right there at the threshold. Pulling power back, adding flaps. There you can see the flaps drop on the external view. It was a pretty tight pattern because of the terrain up ahead. And then there's a little river down there. Can't remember the name of it, but made our base turn just as we approached that river. Here we are back in the real world airplane at pretty much the same location. There's the town of Darrington down below, back outside on the left underwing camera. Look at those fall colors down there. That's really, really pretty. Looking forward to Simulator 2024. As I understand it, will have full season capability. Here we are on our base turn on Microsoft Flight Simulator outside the airplane. Again, that's Coronado. They really do an outstanding job designing these simulator airplanes. And here we are turning base leg in the real world airplane. All those gorgeous fall colors up in the mountain, tremendous. And there's the gorgeous little mountain town of Darrington. Wish I had time when I landed there to explore it a little bit. Back outside the airplane in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Getting ready to turn final here. And there's our final turn from inside the cockpit in Flight Simulator 2020. I found the handling of the airplane was outstanding in Flight Simulator. Very realistic. I was very impressed with that, and I understand they're going to improve that even further when they come out with 2024. Getting ready to turn final, the real world airplane from the external view. There's the river down to the right side that you can see there. Flying right over the town of Darrington, back inside the cockpit, lining up with runway 28, heading to the west. And after we land, we'll taxi and just kind of show you some more views of the Darrington Airport and how it compares with the Orbx Scenery in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. There we are lined up, POV camera inside the flight simulator. Everything's looking great. Back outside the airplane, look at those clouds out in the distance. Fantastic. The different cloud layers, you can see the higher and lower clouds. It's extremely realistic. Super, super impressed. And there we are back in the real world airplane, external view, getting ready to touch down on runway 28. And back inside the cockpit, real world, and we are on the ground. Look at those trees off to the left there in the distance. Gorgeous colors on that day. Back to Flight Simulator 2020. And there's our touchdown, and we're going to roll out there toward the end of the runway and taxi back to the tarmac that we took off from. Again, to give you a good comparison between the real world and the flight simulator. And we're slow rolling down to the end of the runway here. We're going to make a left turn out and get onto the taxiway. It's a small airport, but sure is pretty, nestled here in this gorgeous valley. And here we are at the end of the runway, getting ready to turn onto the taxiway, making our left turn there in the real world, back in the cockpit. Look at those trees in the distance. Really, really pretty day. And turning onto the taxiway and back to Flight Simulator 2020, external view. Look at those mountains in the background with those glaciers on the peaks. So realistic looking, so incredible. I have become, in the last just month or two since I got a new computer, a real believer in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Again, there are some improvements that need to be made, but I'm hopeful when 2024 comes out that they'll have addressed those concerns that I have in terms of interaction with the airplane, the avionics, radios, navigation systems. There we are back in the real world. Look at that gorgeous mountain in the background there. The same one where we made our base leg turn. And coming up back to the tarmac where we are going to park the airplane. Back external view, Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, one of the things I noticed when I first did a video on the comparison, there was distortion on the external view. I resolved that. That was not the fault of Flight Simulator 2020. Back to real world, and there you can see the tarmac in the distance there where we're going to park. Back in the cockpit here. Boy, what a gorgeous day it was. This was actually filmed 4 years ago, I believe. And I unarchived it to compare it again to Flight Simulator 2020. Getting ready to come up to our turnout there to the parking area. There's some hangars to the right, very realistic, well done in terms of the artwork. And there's our turnout. And we're getting ready to park the airplane back inside POV view. And then we're going to go back into our Coronado Archer airplane in the cockpit view. Again, super, super good scenery. They did an outstanding job, the Orbx folks. And here we are making our left turn, get ready to park the airplane, and then we'll wrap up the video. Again, the goal here was to share the absolute stunning quality of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 with real-world footage. And then we are stopping the airplane, external view 2020. And then back in the cockpit. And there's a flight crew out there in the distance. And we're shutting down the airplane here. I sure appreciate you joining me. Feel free to post any comments, but boy, I am really becoming a strong believer in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. And there's shutting off the ForeFlight on the iPad. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again next time.